blessing to those ancient words and bring them alive in new ways for us so that we can make a difference in the world on Jesus' behalf. Would you pray with me for a moment? Holy God, breathe your Spirit through us and open up our hearts and our minds and give me the clarity to speak the message that you would have us hear today. We know that we approach you with a kind of humility that will put our thoughts and our prayers and our perspectives and what we think you're calling us to do in the right context. So we really are accountable to one another, to you, and to the world in which we live. Make it so by the power of your Holy Spirit. And the people were heard to say, Amen. So as you know, well, maybe if you're a first-time guest, you wouldn't know, but I have been working on a sermon series called Leading Causes of Life. And what we've been looking at is there are 5 causes for life. And actually it's a play on where oftentimes we focus more on the leading causes of death as opposed to the leading causes of life. And so as Sean mentioned, last week we talked about agency, which is work or doing, but there's connection, blessing, coherence, agency, and today we'll be talking about hope. And remember that part of the series is remembering that the focus of our energy and the focus of our attention on what's alive in many ways is what sustains life as opposed to being oriented towards what's dying or what's taking life away. So hope, what is it? Desmond Tutu says hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. Somebody said hope is a little voice you hear whisper, maybe, when it seems the entire world is shouting, no! I kind of love this. I'd never thought of this before, but each letter of hope, helping other people everywhere. That's kind of fun, isn't it? That's almost like agency, coherence, connection, all wrapped up. That could be our theme image for the whole series. But I want you to focus on this image for a minute because it reminded me of the time when I lived in Colorado, and Colorado is a very dry place, especially in the upper elevations. And I remember hiking along these dry, I mean, you could see the dust going along as you were walking, and lo and behold, there would be this beautiful little flower coming right up out of the side of the path, and I would think to myself, how is it possible that that life is coming out of what looks like there's nothing there? So if we were to think, those of you who are gardeners, and I am not, but I know what a nice garden looks like, it does not look parched and cracked like this. So if we were to look at this picture, we would probably assume not much would grow there. And yet, here it is. That's what hope is. All of the major religions have hope at their core. Our national history had a lot of hope involved. Those first pilgrims that dared to get on a ship and come across the ocean, it still stuns my mind that they would take that kind of risk. And then, of course, Lewis and Clark, we wouldn't be here today. Well, probably we wouldn't be if Lewis and Clark hadn't decided that a hopeful journey would lead them from one side of the country to the other. How many of you, Sean spoke about being an immigrant. How many of you are ancestors to immigrants? I don't need to preach another sermon about immigrants right now, then, do I? And the civil rights movement was certainly ripe with hope. And I don't know how many of you remember Selma or Montgomery or some of those pictures of people being beaten to death, or almost literally beaten to death. What kind of strength and energy and hope it took to keep moving through that. And this is a picture of a mother whose name is Jean Manforth. She's right here, and this is her son Morty. And this is Christopher Street in New York City, and it was called the Liberation Parade. This was one mother's effort with an idea that all children should be honored regardless of their sexual orientation. This is the precursor to the Pride Parade. And she was the founder of PFLAG, which stands for Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays, and now that's been expanded to Transgender, Queer, and Inquiry. Now I want to shift to a kind of deeper understanding of informed hope. And this is a picture of our 8-month-old puppy Finnegan. And if you've ever tried to raise a puppy into an adult dog, you know that you live with informed hope that there will be a time, 5 or 6 years down the road, that it might pay off all of the things that you do over and over and over and over again. Now, what is important about training dogs, or any mammals for that matter, is that they're really good at remembering what happened in the past so they don't make the same mistake again. So when you train a dog, for example, Finnegan is sitting very nicely in that picture, but he did not do that when we first brought him in. So you know about conditioned responses, so that you make a connection with something a dog really wants, like a little treat that you keep in your pocket, and you get really good at getting them to do what you want with a treat, and then all of a sudden you put a hand signal or a voice command with it, and they'll do that without the treat. Most of the time. Most of the time. That's why it's informed hope. But they're not, so they're pretty smart at figuring out what's happened in the past and what they'll do in the present. They're not so smart about figuring out in advance something that hasn't happened to them yet. Humans have that capacity. We have the capacity of this kind of intelligence, memory of the future. Now, isn't that a fascinating kind of turning of things? Memory of the future. We tend to live out of our expectations, not just our histories. Right? Hopefully. So here's informed hope in action. This is a picture of William and Diane Young, and this was an illustration from a book I've been using, Leading Causes of Life by Gary Gunderson and Larry Prey. But William and Diane Young are pastors of a church called the Healing Center in Memphis, Tennessee. How many of you have been to Memphis, Tennessee? There are some really wonderful things about Memphis. There are some really challenging things about Memphis. And so most of the kids in Memphis schools face a tough and lonely walk through the valley of the shadow of failure. A third of them don't even graduate from high school. So the Youngs asked themselves, what if the lives of these kids were not on their own? Connection? What if they were not left to be distracted? Coherence? They'd be on the honor roll. Notice it was not a question. Would they be on the honor roll? It was a statement. They would be on the honor roll. That is memory of the future. And Diane had such a powerful, vivid memory of the future that the 100 kids that went to their church could actually get on the honor roll, that she got in her car and she drove to the 6 different public high schools in Memphis where her kids were all going. She figured out which kid was in which school, went and talked to the principal and came in and said, my kids are going to be on the honor roll. And you can imagine that the response was one of confusion, mystery, and please, lady, what's this preacher lady doing in my office? More connection, more agency. Kids started doing homework because it was expected that they would be on the honor roll. Wow. The future, in many ways, is more real than our past or present, and it has the power to claim our time, attention, resources, and energy. Now, take a minute to think about anything that's significant that has happened in your lifetime. Something that was a significant change, let's say a significant change for the better. It doesn't just appear. We have to have a memory of the future. We have to almost believe that it's true even when it isn't yet. Isn't that what hope is? It's a cause for life, and it connects all of the other causes. Now, there is a caveat to hope, because sometimes hope can be dangerous if it is not informed. In fact, I love the way Gary Gunderson said, there are some religious people that get on the bus and drive it too fast around the curve. Which is why it has to be informed. It can't just be, it's got to be accountable with other people. Other people got connected. The story of Diane is that the principals started working together, the teachers started working together, other churches decided to do this. So there was agency, coherence, community, connection, and blessing. There's informed hope here at Beaverton. This is Bridget Calfee. How many of you have met Bridget? I bet you met her and you didn't even know it. She's the executive director of Home Plate. And back in 2004, there were a bunch of people from our community that realized that there were more and more kids who were couch surfing. There were more and more kids who were living in their cars. There are more and more kids who are being threatened to be deported because they were unaccompanied youth. And their parents had to go back to wherever they were from. And so Bridget had this idea that maybe there could be a way to serve, to meet the needs of these homeless students. And so their mission at Home Plate it supports the positive development of young people experiencing homelessness or housing instability through community building, education, access to services, resources, and youth empowerment. There's connection, cohesion, agency, blessing, and hope. We envision communities where homelessness is a short-term circumstance, not a long-term or chronic condition. Memory of the future. We have informed health here at Bethel. Several years ago, as McPherson said in his stewardship talk, we started talking about church growth at this church. We didn't just start talking about it, we decided to experiment and do some things. And here it is, the Sunday after a holiday when usually our attendance is down, and sisters and brothers, it doesn't look like it's down very much to me. And we had 15 new members join last week. And every time there is opportunity for church to grow, then we have to start asking ourselves, well, if you pray and you get what you pray for, then what do you do? Because all of a sudden, we're not the same church we used to be. And every church I've ever known about says we want to grow, and then they start growing, they change, and they're like, hey, wait a minute. This isn't the church. This isn't my church. Where'd my church go? There's also another statistic. If a church goes to 80% capacity, which is about what we're at, visitors oftentimes come in and leave. So Rita's granddaughter, I'm glad you came in and stayed, because I noticed that you came in and you actually had to find a place. Somebody helped you. So we have opportunity to ask ourselves all kinds of questions about church growth. Why grow? Well, we wanted more vitality and energy. We wanted our progressive identity and mission to actually continue to take off rather than just being hidden in this little jewel here on the corner of 5th and Watson. We think social justice is important. We want more people to join us. We want more people to be equipped. We want a multi-generational church. I had a friend of mine visit from Boulder 14 years ago, and he said, David, I was a little nervous when I walked in because there were mostly gray heads in the church. but you'll turn it around, I'm sure, within a year and a half. Well, he missed by about 10 and a half years, 12, 13, whatever. But the good news is, it's working. We are reaching more, and we are more multi-generational. We're working on faith formation. We're financially healthy. You heard our stewardship speakers say, this congregation dreamed into the future, had a memory of the future last January because we passed a deficit budget. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of it. I don't want to keep doing a deficit budget. And I want to have a staff that actually likes to do what they're doing, and they do. But sometimes if you ride somebody too hard, they start feeling like, boy, look at things have changed. Has anybody noticed what I've done? We've got to be centered in loving God. So, we're going to have all kinds of opportunities in 2018 and 2019 to ask the kinds of questions that have begun to kind of come up through. How big do we want to be? What difference does it make? Do we have particular goals? What are those goals? And how do we want to live out our sense of call? Do we want to start having 2 services? Do we want to plant another church in another community? Do we want to have a capital campaign that busts Beaverton wide open and we build affordable housing right over here on 5th Street? What would happen if we actually bought that block and built affordable housing over there? Wouldn't that be terrific? Yeah, it's going to take a lot of money. That's the small, or maybe not so small. But the reality is we have to have a memory of the future. A memory of the future. So we got to start by equipping the people who enable this church to grow. Because it's almost embarrassing for me to say, but some of our staff have had to rely on food stamps because of the salary we pay. I'm embarrassed by that. Church culture is the people that serve in the church. They're so loving people. They just love what they do. They'll do it for less than minimum wage. I'm not talking about myself, by the way. I am paid a living wage. I am. So let's be people who can have a memory into the future. You want to do that? You want to be a part of that? Yeah, okay. Well, bring your pledge cards next week. Get out your checkbook. Well, we can actually give online. If you go to our website, there'll be a way to do that. And let me just finish by saying, some churches or some people that visit churches think all they talk about is money. And I will say this, the churches that are alive and are growing have found a way to talk about it that connects with mission so that it doesn't feel like you're pounding a turnip. It feels like you have an opportunity to be a part of something that is really making a difference in the world. And just for the record, Jesus mentioned money more times in the gospel than any other issue. Financial, economic justice was important to Jesus just like it is today. Friends, the good news is hope is as powerful and as important as agency and coherence and connection and blessing. And when they work together, we have leading causes for life. And the people were heard to say, Amen. We have an opportunity to continue our generosity now as we gather